There's a quote that says, life is a journey with lessons to learn, problems to solve, but I think most of all, experiences to enjoy. You're welcome to Chapters. And on today's show, we want to talk about the journey of life and living. The journey with its craziness, the journey with its adventures, the journey with its pains, obviously, and just this whole adulting journey that sometimes they never really warn us about. We just meet it as we grow and we have to learn and evolve with it. I'm very excited about the person that I'm going to be having this conversation with. And let me first of all introduce his book. It's called From a Long Way, How Desires Are Transformed into Reality. And the author and my guest on the show today is Mr. Sam Egube. He is many things in the midst of it all, but I'll just introduce him as the Commissioner for Economic Planning and Budget, Lagos State. You are welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Nice to have me on the show. Thank you very much.
It is so nice to have you here, sir. Thank you for coming. Thank you for making out time of your very busy schedule. So thank you, sir. This is a story of your life.
Yep.
Thus far, up to a point.
Up to a particular point.
Up to a point. And it captures so many experiences that we all go through. And I'm sure that anyone watching can pick from here, can pick from there, can pick from everywhere. But when I read it, the first thing I thought was this kind of book you write when you're like 90. You know, and you're like, okay, finally, life is winding down. Let me now share. Because we're not just sharing your story, we're very vulnerable with your journey, your lessons, your family, your marriage, your failures, your poverty. So we might use, great terms to describe you now, but you've really come from a long way. Let's start. What inspired you to write this book at the time that you wrote it?
At some point, you've learned a lot of lessons in life, and it became clear to me. I had a conversation with someone who said, you need to write. And I said, I've been trying to write. And he says, you need to leave a legacy. You need something that your people, your children, and other people can read. You may not be able to tell the whole story in just a short conversation. It occurred to me also that I learned quite a bit from my dad. But I think I can count how many times I sat down with my dad in his entire life to have a conversation. But each of those moments were great. It would have been great if I had a book that told me the whole story. And so today I will be able to say, okay, but why did he do that? And probably I will have some insight. I think that was the real motivation for writing the story up to where it ends. And because life is an ongoing story, I know my story still continues. But,
Yes.
but while you're at a particular point, you need to tell the story up to that point.
Thank you for doing that. Because like I said, sometimes we think, wait, when I get to a certain point and, I've learned all the lessons of life. This is an amazing book. And I think it's one, I actually read it 2 years ago.
Wow. Yeah.
Yes,
that was
actually.
when it just came out.
Yeah, exactly. And then I got a copy and I read it then. And from then, I always knew that when we're recording Chapters again, but when I had to start reading it again for this, I was like, I've even forgotten all these things. So let's start from the beginning. One of the things that really captures me as a person is how our upbringing shapes us, whether we know it consciously or not. You've had a very interesting upbringing. You come from a family of 5 boys and a girl.
6 boys.
6 boys.
Well, 5 boys and a girl. I'm the 6th boy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you are the 6th boy. So you have 5 older brothers. Exactly.
Yeah.
How did that upbringing shape you?
Very interesting. So I grew up a lot of the times feeling alone because my immediate elder brother was 5 years older. So just before you say Jack Robinson in primary school, he was in secondary school. That meant he was in boarding house already. And that left me, my younger and only sister, and the last boy, who was really a baby at that time, Therefore, you only looked forward to interacting with these seniors when they came back on holidays. And if you have 5 years between you and your immediate elder brother,
That's quite
it's quite a ladder to climb. But I managed to make his friends my friends at some point. For me, it was quite aggressive learning, right, until I too went to school, secondary school. My mom was always there. She was a teacher, and therefore I spent most of my time with her. In the kitchen, out of the kitchen, in the markets to negotiate. For her, every buy was a moment of victory or sadness, depending on how well she negotiated the price of tubers of yam. And I was there as the judge to say it looks good, or to give a guess as to how much the price might have been. That was what childhood was like. It was school, back from school, church. And in those days, the neighborhoods you didn't have the kind of controls you had now. So you could go places. I could really, sometimes looking back, it looks like terrible risk, but I could trek far from home to go and just explore the entire city. And then provided I came back home on time, it was okay. My dad was extremely strict. He was an educationist. Once he comes, everybody put yourself together. So that was the journey. That was how childhood was to me.
It's interesting. Okay, so let me first ask. That means you must be able to cook. Since you spent lots of time with your mother in the kitchen.
Actually, the skill I picked out in the kitchen was that I'm able to taste well.
Nice. Even that is a skill.
It's a skill.
So I'm going to start from your chapter 2. And what I would like us to do is you told your story, but you told your story in a way that we can pick specific life lessons. Your chapter 2 is titled Little Battles. I think they were big battles that you fought here. And this, funny enough for me, is when you were still a child. And one of the lessons that I got here is people that you surround yourself with. And I just want to talk about the importance of that. You really talk about relationships a lot in this book. But you told the story of when you were in a class and you came 41st in 149 people. Yep. And there you were really feeling amazing with yourself, cool. Right? And then you went to see a friend, rest in peace. I know you said he has passed now. Yeah. And he told you that he came 6th. And all of a sudden you felt very dumb.
True.
And one of the lessons you pointed out there is if you surround yourself with people that are average, then what you think is amazing about you is actually average. Certainly. And I just want you to talk about that.
Now, in my life, right, I have always thrived in environments that tends to where lifting up is required. Now, but what that means is that every time you feel under pressure, you feel inadequate because you are in an environment where you are dealing with people that have gone ahead of you. And it's the same thing. It's a good feeling to be ahead of your peers. Yeah. It's a very good feeling. And it works even great when all your peers are average. Right, so it's easier to attain to that, and therefore you do not want to transit to a place where you suddenly are feeling behind, right? And you see it a lot with young people. They were first in their class, and then they went to a federal school where champions came from everywhere, and suddenly they seem to be struggling, not with the academics, but with being first. You are probably now 15th, 20th. It doesn't remove the fact that you were great, but it just means that you have seen a new dimension of what greatness could be, right? And for me, I would rather feel uncomfortable because where I'm going is far ahead. So I need that pull all the time. I need to figure out how to climb higher. But trust me, you will have to cope all that time with the feeling sometimes of inadequacy. For example, in secondary school, people come home with video cassettes, as it was in those days, and they tell you stories about the movies they've watched. My dad wouldn't go in that direction. So sometimes you can't participate because you can't tell the story. You can't exchange cassettes with your friends to go and watch at home. So you come under pressure and you have to fight whether you want to allow a complex set in or you want to find your space in that gathering. And so you see, when I started to talk about my experience in secondary school, even though I had no cassettes to exchange. When mathematics kicked into my experience, it was now a rallying point. So sometimes you need to figure out in staying in the group what is special about you. So you need to bring something special to the table. Otherwise, the group will not have you. It's just the way life is. Relationships are value propositions, and you need to have your quivers full of them.
You said that in the book. That's just, I think you've just sort of shifted my perspective on understanding peer pressure, on knowing how to stand out of the pressure and finding your own unique space. And that's just so powerful. Another thing that you mentioned, still from that story, that I thought was very instructive, was eventually, by the next, is this semester session? I can't remember what it was at that time. You then became sixth.
Yep.
And your friend also became sixth. But somehow, this time he wasn't so happy. Because obviously, you had gotten up to him. And he maybe felt, so I think you actually wrote it in the book, that he even felt he helped you come up, but he didn't go higher. And I love what you said, because you said sometimes your success is not necessarily, it doesn't make other people happy when you succeed. And, you know, in growing up in life, especially when you have those kinds of relationships, there's a tendency, obviously, to be on the same level with your peers or even to move ahead of them and to just manage those kinds of relationships. Because you said it here, you said, I learned that day that your success is not necessarily joy to every other person and that people could get uncomfortable by it. But you also said a few years down the line, Annie became much matured and realized he could learn from others as well. And that we should not focus on the bad in people, because we destroy relationships at times as well. Because all you see Annie as is this boy that was not happy at my joy.
Yep. Many times it's a matter of how you interpret the world, right? Sometimes you see the world as a constrained space. So you got it is why I didn't get it, right? If you do not interpret it from a point of view that we can both get it, right? What you then see is a kind of competition that your success becomes, I interpret it as my failure. Not because it is, but that's just the way I interpret it. One of the lessons I've learned is that life is constantly shifting.
Absolutely.
Right? And what you consider right today can become wrong tomorrow. Right? Therefore, I hold relationships stronger than correctness. Right? Because the idea of correctness can shift. And you could have lost a relationship because of what you thought was correct. So that's the way I view relationship. And the way I communicate it is that together is better than right. Sometimes you need to give people some space to grow. Some other times you need to just understand that that is how they view the world and accommodate that view, even though you do not embrace it. And that is exactly it. I've seen that, quite frankly, your disciples may betray you, but it does not stop them from being the apostles, your apostles later on. Next thing I would like to say is that darkness and light dwells together in the same place, right? Many times we think that light is the absence of darkness, but it's not always so, because the wheat and the tares can grow together. Yes. And therefore, I can either emphasize my relationship with you around your badness, or I can emphasize my relationship with you around your goodness, right? And if I stayed sufficiently with your goodness, the knowledge and the thought around your goodness fills me up, right? And makes it easy for me to write off your badness that will show up from time to time. So that way you are able to manage.
This is a powerful life lesson. Wow. Powerful life lesson. And I hold that very dearly. We need to go on a short break now. And when we come back, we'll continue on this amazing book. There's so many other things. Your story, it's just the beginning of the beginning of the beginning. Guys, do not go anywhere. We'll be back with Wealthy Sam, Mr. Egube, to continue this conversation. You are welcome back to Chapters, and we're talking about the journey of life today with its interesting twists and turns through the amazing, amazing book, From a Long Way, How Desires Are Transformed into Reality, which is what we all desire. And I still have with me Mr. Egube. Thank you once again for being here.
Thank you.
I want to talk about something that I think I also saw through the thread of this book, and that is the concept of I have done my best. That's something you kept mentioning, and how many times we say that almost to say, I've done my best to, but your best doesn't necessarily translate to the result that you want. But we know how to just stay in that place of, for want of a word, mediocrity, and say we've done our best. And you shared from how you failed your exams in school. I've done my best, And please talk about that, because you really expounded on that, and I loved your viewpoint on that.
So, life really works in a way that every time you have a valid excuse, right, it gives you emotional succor, but it doesn't take you any step closer to your destination. So many times, we learned it growing up, right? The glass is broken. Who broke it? Not me. It's good enough, right? But it doesn't mean the family has not lost the use of that glass. And the way I put it typically is that it doesn't matter how great and how qualifying or how good your excuse is for failing, you will not be promoted.
Completely.
Right? The lecturer might say, oh, sorry, you were sick, you threw up in class, the invigilator took you to the hospital, and if they are kind, they will say, when will you be able to do the receipt? And I think life is like that. Good excuses take you nowhere. And we have to keep on striving,
Yep.
I remember when I decided that I wanted to have a black belt, for example. And at that time, I was already in my late 40s in karate. And I knew that there would be enough reason on the way to say, this is not for you, this is not for you. But the truth is that if you do not press on and do what is necessary, right, you will miss the point, right? And that's why I use the word W-I-N, win, that really to win, you must do what is necessary. Now, what is necessary might be much more than what you know as your best today, right? But never be afraid of what you know as your best, because humans are known to do better than what they always knew as their best. In the sports world, it is normal to do better than your personal best. So just know that if what is required is bigger than what you know of yourself today, then it means you need more practice. You need to develop yourself further in that area of development without throwing away the goals. So what the idea of this is that you can do all things, right? You really can, right? But you will not do all things, right? You will only do those things that you practice, the things you strive for, the things you keep within focus, and the things you continue to practice until you win, right? So even if you were born to an Igbo parent, your name is Nneka, right? But you were exposed to French foster parents, you grew up in the south of France, you will only speak French.
Yes.
You won't even be able to speak Igbo. So it's important that we have that perspective to life, that if you want to win, then do what is necessary. If you try and you hit a roof, just know you need to try again. You need to try again, and you need to build the capacity, right, to win. The last I will say about this is, sometimes we disqualify ourselves from the race because we see the race. The race is not for the swift, right? So you see that you are slow. And so you do not engage your mind and your being in participating in the race because you feel it is for the fast. But you must step back and see what's common to all of us, both the fast and the slow. It's time and chance. What do I do with my time so that when my chance comes, I will be fast and win the race? And so you begin to build up from that point, rather than from what you see that is obvious. I'm slow. This race is fast people, and so you disqualify. Because you cannot participate from a life that you have disqualified yourself from. And life generally tries to convince you to give things up.
Wow.
They give you enough logical and analytical reason, and I'm not talking of lies, analytical reason with evidence why you should disqualify yourself from a race, right? And what I'm saying is, no, if it's something you really want, then focus on it. We've seen people with cerebral palsy do unimaginable things. We've seen people without hands and legs do much better than people who had hands and legs. We've seen people that were blind but appreciate life even better than those who can see. But typically, if you know that life plays out in a way as to disqualify you, discourage you, say that you are not enough, then it must mean that if you want to get there, then you must convince yourself that you must continue to keep on trying and trying. And not just trying because of the routine of trying with the mindset that I can make it, that determination that is around your tenacity towards your goal.
I'm speechless. That's why I'm quiet. You have said so many things in what? Okay. I'm actually speechless, which is not like me. Wow, sir, you have cooked. There's a way someone can speak and say some things, but it's obvious these things you're saying, you've cooked them, you've lived them. So they are coming from a place of not just depth, but experience. Oh my God. Okay, let's move on. Let's talk about your career path. You literally moved me into stillness. Let's talk about your career path. Now, people can look at you today and be like, oh my God, Mr. Egube, I want to be like him. But they don't know like I like to say, the story behind the glory. And your journey has been, in fact, that you are here today is like, it's not straight at all. You need to even write another book as to how you got here. But even just from what you wrote in the book, you've been at the lowest low.
Yep.
And it just attests to what you were saying now. And you could have counted yourself out so many times. Because you see, your life is the life of many people. And many people already, in this time and season that we are as well, which is even more special than maybe the time and season where you lived all these things, it seems like there's no hope. What was it that just kept you going? And if you want to share one or two stories, I would actually also appreciate that.
Okay, so I think if I were to reduce things to a few things, I would say it's just the capacity to continue to encourage yourself, combined with the capacity to protect your mind, right? So, for example, when I had to work with a cleaning company, at this time I had left Arthur Anderson. My team, my colleagues were working in Citibank. And one of the clients of the cleaning company was Citibank. So you need to go in there, Sam, ex-Arthur Anderson, cleaning the floor. I think because I know that I will struggle with this when I get into that environment, I instruct myself before I go in how I would respond to those things. So, Sam, what are you doing? Yeah, I'm trying to make this place clean. We need to put superior skills in this environment to ensure that you guys are more productive, more efficient. Now, those are not the language of the cleaner, right? But it at least protected my mind. Look, the truth is that if you stopped, it's because you convinced yourself to stop.
Wow.
I typically would tell people that a man really never dies except he gives up the ghost, right? And there's a ghost in everything you're trying to do in your dream. And there are times, you see it in the book. At one point, even getting the 2-1, I needed someone to release me from that commitment. Because there are certain commitments you take on that just creates a burden. And maybe if you let it go, maybe you'll feel freer, you'll be happier, but somehow commitment comes with responsibility and it's burdensome, right? So the ways of man is to embrace things that make you more comfortable. So really, this is my life. Let me just cool down. Don't try to aspire to anything, because every time you aspire and you are not there, it creates frustration. So the world is a funny place. So it leaves you like in a cool place when you give up and say, okay, this is now where I belong, So I'm sure even in carrying out some of these, your programs, there are times the steps you want to rise are audacious and you just want to leave it where it is. You're okay, but it's not exactly the way it is, which is why life is like a pyramid. It's only few people that get to the top. It works all the time, right? And then you have a lot of company when you are dealing with averages. Right, so enough to say you are normal. It's okay. I mean, why are you trying? I mean, if you are trying to be first in class, they call you a fico in school. Yeah, because you should be with us. We're here. We're happy people, right? And to get there, you need some sacrifice. You need some separation. You need to do things a little bit differently to go ahead of the pack. And those paths to the top are very lonely. Are very lonely paths. It's protecting your mind and creating different defense mechanisms to get your mind to remain focused. So, for example, one of those mechanisms I have, because sometimes you get to a bad place, you don't even know what next to do. Even your mind is not thinking about a next step, right? And I was driving one of my rickety buses once, and I think it's in the book.
Yes, you're a bus conductor.
Right? Yeah, I was driving, and I was on Third Mainland Bridge. And my bus stopped on the left side. That's the fast lane, right? And that was the first time it was happening to me. And I found, when you are driving, you move from the left to the right, and it looks quite easy. You look at the rear mirror, you change lane. But that day, it was so tough to get my car out of the road to the right side, And then I learned that day that if you are not in motion, your maneuvering capabilities are very weak. So you need to keep moving, What it means is that I don't have a job, but I can't stay. I join myself to someone else that is working, because there's nothing about me that is moving right now. So I join a moving company, even for free. When I joined this waste management company, I joined offering free work. So I get out of the house, I'm in the mix. I'm doing things and I'm interacting with people. Life tends to want to isolate you, want to give you enough reason not to go out. So you can't stop. You crawl if you can. If you can't run, crawl, roll on the floor, but you need to keep moving. And sometimes the movements that you require they're not with you, right? So you join someone else who is moving. That way, some of those old engines, the way you start them is you manually start them, and then when they start, they are able to go on their own.
Wow. I think you need to, do you have a master class on life? I think you need to consider it. I'm not even joking. You are too intense. This is such intensity. We need to go on a short break now, and once we come back for the last part, I knew already that we couldn't touch a lot of things in your book, but I now wanted to talk more personal about your marriage, and that another interesting journey of your life that went into other things. I think, in one word, your whole life has just been intense, so I'm not surprised that you're bringing out all of this intensity. Wow, Mr. Egube is taking us on a very deep, thought-provoking lane. You need to watch this over and over again and really think about the things he's saying, because they're just profound. But we'll go on a short break now, and we'll be right back to continue this conversation. Wow, you are welcome back to Chapters, and I'm feeling the heat. It's weird. Mr. Egube has been putting us under some intense intense words, intense thoughts, intense paradigms as to life and living. But this is exactly why I wanted us to have this conversation, because even reading your book, a lot of things just changed about how I personally saw life. So thank you for pouring out on a deeper level some of the things that you wrote in the book. And like I said before the break, I want us to now go into your personal, well, everything's your personal life, but into your marriage. You did mention at some point you met the love of your life, so beautiful, so wonderful. Love and special greetings to her. And that was a journey that spiraled into another adventure of your life. You know, from the very beginning, I just had a laugh. You got married without a house. And I said, after all this journey, why will you get married without a house again? You said, in fact, you moved into your friend's house. You needed to get a house, but you wanted to put all of your money in the wedding. Let's have a wonderful wedding. And you said, however, now, don't do it all, because he said in the book, he knows that a house wasn't necessary for the wedding to happen, but he will not advise anybody today to wed before having a house. Please, have a house before you marry. And you moved into your brother's place.
Yeah, my brother's place.
Your brother's place, yes. But let's just talk about that, because your wife and yourself had another interesting journey. You also had your story of infertility. You didn't even have your first child, until 17 years. Even saying it sounds intense. After marriage. Just tell us about that and how that also shaped you.
Okay, so, I married at 26. And people then said, what's the rush? Again, it comes from the background, So you are SU in secondary school. There's no space for anything. So every time you think about a lady, it has to be marriage you're thinking about. There's nothing else that can be accommodated apart from that. So, so dating was marriage. That was just it. Okay. So that was it. But I needed a particular kind of wife, given what I would call my propensities. I like to be listened to. Listening means there's empathy from the other party, means there is friendship, there's respect and all of that. But I needed one whose humility was not coming as a result of lack of exposure. Right? Because sooner or later exposure will come, and it was clear to me that the thoughts around relationships and around friendships are constantly changing. Because when you talked about value, even though you are determining what I'm giving is valuable to you, what you value is constantly changing. So you see relationship, but why are you upset about this? This is all I've always done. No, you've changed, right? And if I must be part of that relationship, then I must be in a position to observe those changes that are going on. So with my wife, it was easy because we learned off each other. We talked a lot, not just talking, but learning and building some of these principles. Right, my wife is extremely supportive. It's helped the relationship grow. We didn't want to have children for the first 3 years, so we wanted to just be happy with ourselves. And suddenly it was it's like a joke. The children just was not coming. Initially, the problem of money was a big problem. So children we didn't miss them, right? And then we realized that time had gone. 5 years had gone. And then people were asking questions whether it was deliberate. But then it occurred to me that it was not. It was not deliberate, right? And it went through all kinds of things. At some point, I couldn't go to the hospitals because there were certain aspects of my life, like you did read, I couldn't even afford it, right? But when I then came back into the banking industry, it was something I could now afford. And then there were new problems. First, it was fallopian tubes were not there. Then fallopian tubes, you had ectopic pregnancies, which meant to me that fallopian tubes were there. So I told her, let's be happy about ectopic pregnancy because at least it meant you had fallopian tubes. Okay, and then everything was right and okay, but the pregnancy was not just coming. And then pregnancy started to come and abort. It was extremely frustrating. Because, you know, when you go to the hospital, really wishing that they will find something wrong, so that you start to take an action, but nothing was wrong. And it used to, you know, it was funny how you leave the hospital, the verdict is that nothing is wrong, but you are unhappy with that outcome, you know.
Because at least you'd have, something is wrong, then we know what to do about what is wrong.
You know. And we really traveled everywhere. But one of the things that also kept us was that I told her that, look, there are only two things that can happen. We will either have children or we will not. Yeah, now, if we do, let's say in 8 years' time, we shouldn't allow the 8 years until that time be frustration. Let's enjoy the life, right? Because we finally had a baby, right? So you don't want to waste the 8 years. And if you don't, at least you enjoy the 8 years. You didn't leave it in misery. But there were moments, very tense moments, you know. Sometimes my wife will feel uncomfortable because I'm not complaining and is wondering, so why are you not sad about this? Or why are you not complaining about this? And I say, if I complain, it will put you under pressure. I say, but if you don't complain, it might mean something else. It might mean you have a plan B or something. You know, so it was like a two-edged sword. You know, there are times I used to feel sad, you know, you are leaving church and you are going with, and say, I need to get to children's church to take the kids, and there are no kids to take, so you just move on. But the good side is that I could come home, you know, and tell my wife we are off to London tonight.
And you could
we are off, really off. You know, there's nothing we are waiting for. It's just the two of us, you know. People ask me to say, so how were you that patient? And I said, I don't think I was patient. I think God was just patient with us. Because really, it was not that there were no temptations. It was not like there were no suggestions. But again, I spend a lot of time sometimes preparing for the challenges. Sometimes people feel it's kind of one kind, you know, how will you be preparing for? So as things got like that, I knew I would have opportunity, right, to have children outside wedlock, I will have those opportunities. So I had prepared my responses to that, you know. So eventually, we had our first child. But I think the lesson, and the second one came 5 years after.
5 years after the first child.
The lesson for me was that sometimes we do things without evaluating the innermost recess of the reasons why we do things, and as to whether those things actually satisfy the cravings for which you do them. Because, you know, sometimes you get something you want and you are still unhappy. It means you missed the point in defining the need you are trying to meet. Now, if this is the only need you want to meet and you didn't meet it, it's fine to know you didn't meet it and, oh, well, you had fun throughout your life. But not to take something in its replacement and you are still unhappy about it, or you don't think it feels that in. One of the things people, when they think about unfaithfulness, they think about unfaithfulness only when it has to do with sex, you know, and to say, well, you were unfaithful, you slept with another lady, or you went up. I say, okay, but that sex is probably a few minutes in a day. This person has 24 hours in a day. And from a marketing standpoint, what's your market share of the relationship? You are not participating in the person's work. You are not participating in the person's entertainment. You are not and the person is changing as a result of all of that interaction. Yeah. You know, there are some couples, you take the husband to the office or the wife, and you say, meet John. He knows John, even though he had never met John. He knows John's sitting position. He's participating with that work. And therefore, when the elements come that causes change and brings change, you observe it. So faithfulness, in my view, includes the commitments that come from how much of our lives we share. And life is measured in time, right? So if I only spend 1 hour of my 24 hours with you, and I'm not talking necessarily physically, right? Your market share is small.
It's very small.
And it's likely one day I will come home and you're wondering, who is this? I've changed. You were not part of the things that informed my development. And so you need to learn me over again. You need to learn what I love, right? You know, I was talking about a lady who the husband really loved to pieces, according to him. You know, and as we were counseling them, you know, the lady says, my husband doesn't love me. And I said, your husband told me yesterday that he loves you very much. I called the husband into the meeting. And the husband said, but I bought you a deep freezer just last week. And he said, is it my deep freezer? How is that a show of love? But a lot of us men know that you don't think of deep freezer except in response to love. You just don't think that way, that, I want to buy freezer for all of us. You're actually thinking, so you are loving in a way, but the person who really is supposed to receive the love doesn't count that as love. And so we've learned to practice each other, learn each other, and see each other operate in different scenarios and see the way we respond to those scenarios. We are extremely forgiving of each other because we know we are changing. And if I get angry today, what of when you change tomorrow? Right? Sometimes that anger have spoiled some things today, you know. And I give you the last example, like, you know, so my wife takes her time when we are going out. And, you know, church starts at a particular time. So you can be late for church if you do not come out on time. And, you know, we'll leave the house and, of course, we're now getting late to church. Sometimes I want to leave. I know I will suffer for it if I left her. But so that anger, we begin to talk about it. We get to church late nevertheless. But she's still angry with me and I'm still angry with her. And then after church, we are not yet healed yet, you know. And I told myself that I'm cheating myself. No. Look, I'll go to church late. I'm happy to go late. So we don't have to quarrel about it. And we'll go to church late. We'll now enjoy the service that is left. And we can go for dinner and lunch after that, you know, because I figured out that what is irritating me, I'm not getting a benefit from it, right? I tried different mechanisms. It's not working. So I decided to be happy, right? So many times life is like that. I don't like to fight fights that you won't give me a trophy for winning, right? So when I quarrel with her, nobody congratulates me for the victory, or when I win an argument. You know, and so every point of argument is a point to learn, you know, to understand how we are seeing this matter and how we are communicating about it. And often you will find out that the fight is not necessarily. You can't really change another person, right? The person changed from inside.
Yes.
Something must go in. And really, many times when you change, it's your voice you hear. Tony, this is not good. I think you should change this. That's your voice, right? So we need to respect that. We need to respect the fact that we are dealing with adults. You know, sometimes we think our wives are kids or our husbands are just big babies, teddy bears. These people lived for 20-something, 30-something years without you. They didn't hit every car when they were driving on the road or couldn't cope.
True.
You know, and I think we need to do that and grow together.
Sir, this is indeed a masterclass on life. That idea that I had, was it yesterday or this morning, I'm going to explore it because there's so much in you that I believe that if more people thought, you know, had an open mind, you have a very open mind. If more people thought and lived this way, the world would indeed be a better place. And on this note, I can only ask, where can people get copies of your book?
So you can actually get it on Amazon, but sometimes it's challenging for a lot of people to to even access Amazon, to get it. So I have a distributing agent, and I will leave the number of the person.
Okay, so we'll just write it on the screen.
Yes, please.
Okay. This is a life-changing book. But I mean, listening to you now, I don't know, this has been quite an intense episode. That's the only way the only word in my mind is intense, intense, intense. You have poured out a whole lot that I'm sure that people watching this will have a lot to think about. And we've not actually scratched the surface of anything in this book. No, we have not. And I already knew that it was going to be almost impossible. So it's totally fine. We will have our post-conversation. Maybe we'll organize a masterclass with you later. I want to say thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you especially for making out this time. And thank you for just coming willing to pour and to share. You've been amazing. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, sir. Wow. We have been on a session of life that I'm sure watching this, it has taken you down deep thinking, a lot of things to sort of unlearn, maybe things that you knew before that you are seeing in a different way. And I would also encourage you to please get a copy of this book. His stories are profound. The journey of his life has been one that few people go through. You get to a point and you're like, is it only him going through all these things? The other people that God could have given these kinds of challenges to. But it's really a pointer to really what is the journey of the life of a whole lot of us. And I believe that it will give you perspective, and it will also just give you peace of mind that if he can be where he is today, then brothers and sisters, there is hope for everybody's future. I want to say thank you for watching this edition of Chapters. But remember, it is not about what you know or what you've heard, but what you do with what you know. And until the next time, God bless you. Thank you once again.